Greetings, friends. This is Chris Batts, your host of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In today's episode, I spoke with a legal tech CEO whose platform has been described as incredibly powerful or game-changing. We discussed his big law career, his company, his perspective on the legal industry looking forward, and much more. Just a reminder, the PDF transcript of this audio is available to download. Go to liongroup.recruiting.com/podcast. As many of you know, we interview corporate defense, law firm leaders, partners, general counsel, and legal consultants. You're listening to episode 35 of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast.
Broadcasting from Kansas City, this is the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In each episode, you'll receive actionable ideas and hear personal leadership stories of both men and women serving as leaders and executives in the legal industry. Enjoy a front row seat as Chris Batts speaks with general counsel, legal consultants, and law firm leaders and law partners at the top corporate defense law firms from around the United States.
Welcome to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Batts with the Lion Group. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Jim Delkousis, founder and CEO of PERSUIT. Prior to launching PERSUIT, Jim has 17 years in big law, the first 8 years in construction litigation at King & Wood Mallison in Australia, then a total of 9 years with DLA Piper, 6 of those in Dubai, building their disputes practice, and 3 more back in Australia, including co-global head of infrastructure and construction. Jim founded PERSUIT in 2016 and now has among its customers 10 Fortune 100 companies using the platform to source and compare proposals for external legal services. He received his law degrees from the University of London and the University of Melbourne. Welcome, Jim, to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks very much for that intro, Chris. I feel a bit exhausted having listened to that. I feel a little bit old too, but it's great to be here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I really appreciate your availability. And I just have to say that what people have told me about PERSUIT is that it's scary in the sense is it's disruptive, it's powerful, and it has the ability to do some things to the legal market that people haven't necessarily seen before. So I'd love to hear from you. What is PERSUIT?
So that's an interesting reaction that you've had, the scary bit, and certainly that's not the objective. But essentially what we're looking to do at PERSUIT is to solve a problem that currently exists in the way in which in-house teams source their outside counsel services. Now, typically it happens, Chris, now in a very manual process when you're seeking to send an RFP out and get competitive proposals. What we look to do is make that actually really easy, streamline and automate it, and actually deliver some pricing transparency in the legal market at the top end of town, which to date has been absent. And I think that might be the thing that to some out there might sound a little bit scary, but certainly to our customers, that's what they're looking for. How can I find out what a particular kind of matter in a particular jurisdiction should cost me at a point in time, and just providing an easy way to find the answer to that question is certainly one of the problems we're looking to solve.
It's interesting you use the word transparency.
Yeah.
As if it's not transparent. I mean, who is it transparent to? Is it transparent to the competing services bidding for the work, or is it transparent to the decision makers, the corporate legal departments?
Right. So today, without PERSUIT, it's not transparent to either.
Okay.
But with PERSUIT, by providing a platform in which in-house teams can source outside counsel services and see transparently what the prices are, we certainly provide transparency to the clients, in-house teams, but we also provide transparency to the law firms, because the law firms will be able to see essentially where they rank in terms of their pricing, and sometimes if the client chooses to make the pricing transparent and the clients have that choice, the law firms can actually see anonymized where their competitors have priced the same scope of work. So that transparency actually exists on both sides of the equation, or both sides of the market, which is really important, I should say, because to date, not only have the clients not had it, the law firms haven't had it. And it's something, and I've been a little bit surprised at the benefits, if you like, it's delivered to the law firms because they've seen where the market is in relation to, let's say, that scope of services in that jurisdiction at that point in time.
If I heard you correctly, it's an RFP process and legal service providers, i.e. law firms and other organizations bidding for the work, they're all anonymous, but they...
Correct.
Okay, so they actually don't know who's at the table competing necessarily.
Correct. The clients can choose to let the law firms know. It's entirely up to them.
Okay.
They have that ability, but typically the clients, and we're typically dealing with clients with their panel firms. It's not, we don't purport to be a marketplace where we, let's say, match our clients with law firms. We found when you're dealing, at the Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 level, panels have already been established. That the supplier side, if you like, has already been vetted and is in place. So what we're trying to do essentially is facilitate and deliver some transparency in relation to those existing relationships rather than trying to create new relationships.
So obviously transparency is one of the core goals and tenets of what you're creating. What are some of the other benefits from PERSUIT?
Certainly from both the client and the law firm side, it's actually streamlining and automating what has been typically a very manual and spreadsheet-intensive type of process. Certainly for those clients who typically do seek proposals for their outside counsel work, they're doing that manually. They're creating an RFP document. They're sending it out to their 2 or 3 or 4 panel firms. Those firms are responding with PDF documents, and then some poor soul at the client side has got to put together all of the proposals and put them in a spreadsheet and try and do an apples and apples comparison. Yep. And that's painful not only from the client side, but also from the law firm side too, because you can imagine what happens in a law firm. There's a BD team, a pitch team, and they're all kind of cutting and pasting, if you like, to try and respond to multiple proposals in a way which, again, is difficult to collaborate on, is very manual. So just streamlining and automating that is some of the huge benefits that we deliver in addition to the price transparency.
Jim, what have you found as far as a reduction of time? Has there been, I'm sure you guys have benchmarked and looked at, this typically takes X amount of weeks or hours. What have you guys done?
Depending upon the circumstance, but there's anywhere between a 3 and a 10 times greater level of efficiency.
That's amazing.
Just by having it in an automated and streamlined way. I mean, for example, we provide best practice RFP templates across different types of outside counsel engagements, whether they're for litigation matters, IP matters, employment matters, and so forth. And having those templates available to the in-house team so that they can scale those internally, or allowing those in-house teams to take the Word document they otherwise had and create a template, and then again scaling that internally has saved an enormous amount of time. And also institutionalize knowledge that otherwise gets lost in emails and spreadsheets. On the comparative side, the physical process of actually, particularly when you're going out to a number of firms, having those proposals come back after you've gone out for a holiday for a week and having those proposals come back in an easy comparative form has saved days and days, if not weeks, of otherwise manual time.
It's amazing. There's such an incredible amount of savings for both the client and the legal service providers. So they're getting work hopefully quicker, and they're also spending less time, full-time equivalents on the RFP process.
That's correct. But not only that, one thing that I haven't really appreciated at the beginning, but it's become a clear benefit for the law firms, is law firms are now being invited to more opportunities than they otherwise were previously, just because it was difficult. If you added another law firm, then that was another proposal that you had to review and put into a spreadsheet and so forth. But on the PERSUIT platform, simply you can very easily add another law firm and include the panel firms so that they each get essentially more opportunities that they can respond to and a better understanding of the kind of work that the client is sending out to its panel firms.
It's interesting because I know, based on your website, based on talking to others who have seen this tool, this product in action, the solution, that it draws on the question of market value. What is the market value of what is being delivered? And I guess that is the intrigue, and definitely not to sound doomsday-ish as I kind of opened up our thing, but it's more like this tool is incredibly powerful because it brings, as you say, transparency, but also a sobriety and kind of a level playing field to getting things done. Are you finding that your solution is best used for more rote, reoccurring matters? Because, or are you seeing a different kind of market value applied to the top shelf of all legal services? I'm curious.
So Chris, in fact, it's across the board.
Okay.
Right from the more commoditized work, which a number of our clients are bundling up and essentially sending out a portfolio of work and asking their law firms to price that on a competitive basis, right through to the high-stakes litigation matters.
That's
and
amazing.
having those matters broken down into their various phases and having each of the firms price on the basis of those phases. And when you mentioned market value, what we describe, the term that we talk about is true market pricing.
Okay.
And the way we get there is because we always say you never know unless you actually ask the market, because you don't know whether or not, for example, a particular firm has done that particular piece of work in that jurisdiction and has it down pat, so it doesn't have to do any of the learning, or you don't know if a firm's got spare capacity at any point in time and is willing to basically get the bums off seats, or you don't know if the firm is willing to invest, if you like, its time in order to secure that piece of work, so it's willing to do it more competitively. And that's what we talk about when we talk about true market pricing, getting all of those factors working in a way which is real time and going from, we talk about going from a price that law firms would like to be paid to a price that law firms are prepared to be paid. And that's really what clients have been missing out in the past. And from a law firm perspective too, actually knowing what the market is saying about pricing at a particular point in time, because it informs a law firm. For example, if they're 20% above the market, what are they doing that's less efficient than their competitors are doing? Is there some work that actually they shouldn't be doing? Or is it a matter of improving their own processes? So driving the kind of behaviour, if you like, and the kind of pricing that ultimately you see in other markets, in less sophisticated marketplaces, whether it's goods and services or the lower end products, goods and services and so forth, ultimately getting that transparency and competition and letting the market forces kind of sort out what the true market price is at any particular point in time.
Incredibly powerful.
And it's not actually unique to law. It's actually a problem that exists across the broader high-end professional services. You just don't have the kind of marketplace you do right now where you can go on Amazon and see what the price is of a particular product, or you can go on to other lower end, if you like, services platforms and see what the cost is, or see what someone's willing to do, let's say a lower end service product or a deliverable. We don't have that in the higher end legal and other professional service market. And that's part of our objective, trying to get transparency around that.
Let me ask you the question, who are our ideal customers? Who's using it? Is it just the biggest of the big companies?
So there's no doubt right now that our customers, those that have typically a very high legal spend, and it's often that spend is decentralised and they're looking for a way to centralise it, or it's centralised but they're doing it in a manual way. So because the kind of value that we're delivering is reducing external spend and automating processes, typically the ideal profile is the customer, which is in the Fortune 500, it's got a high legal spend, and we're able to deliver significant value very quickly across not only savings, but also across automating those manual processes.
I have to ask myself this question, or I'm going to ask you this. When I think of something like this, does this require an existing foundation of legal technology, or is this a real easy kind of bolt-on to the most archaic corporate legal departments. I've been told by other, say, legal tech founders that numerous Fortune 500s are still in the dark ages when it comes to legal tech application to their corporate legal department operations.
So that's a really good question. And that is one of the key challenges for any tech, but especially legal tech. And Chris, what we learned really early on is that you had to deliver something which was as easy as what the in-house team is doing right now. Yeah. In other words, as easy as an email.
That's great.
And so that's what we focused on right from the outset. How do we make this as simple and intuitive as what our customers are doing right now, but 10xing, if you like, the benefits? So the answer is you don't need any kind of existing technology platform. You literally need a login and you're up and running to issue your requests out to your law firms. Are
there any objections to clients exploring this tool? I mean, it seems like it would be a win-win for everybody.
Yep. Look, so not so much objections, but certain clients recognize where they are in the maturity model, if you like, on legal operations. So those clients that have already got a level, let's say, of centralization of the outside counsel engagements, or at least sending out RFPs, we've got an immediate benefit, and also there's not such a behaviour change challenge there. Mm-hmm. Where it's a little harder for clients is if there's no process right now for, let's say, getting competitive proposals, and let's say each of the in-house attorneys has their own favourites, and that's the way it's been for a long time, then there's a more of a process challenge as well as a behaviour change challenge.
Right, that makes sense.
And some of our clients recognise where they are in that spectrum, and as I said, depending upon where they are, really determines whether they're ready for pursuit and how quick the uptake is.
Let's go back, if we may, and not sound like it's been forever, but go back a couple decades. So you were a litigator. I don't know if you're still considering yourself a litigator at heart, or if you have now fully assumed the legal tech CEO kind of persona. But what led you to start this tool? And give us a little bit of foreground of your training.
So I have, up until 2016, I was a litigator, an arbitration lawyer in the last half a dozen or so years around the construction infrastructure space. So a couple of things, Chris. I was turning 50 and I had a bit of a crisis, the turning 50 crisis, and really asked myself, what does 50 to 60 look like? And does it look exactly the same, essentially, as 40 to 50 and very similar to 30 to 40? And I think I got to the point where I had a fantastic career, had built fantastic teams, and couldn't have been happier with what had happened in the past, but sat down and thought, I actually didn't want the very same thing for the next, let's say, the next decade of my life. Yeah. So that was point number one, the turning 50 crisis, and what does the next 10 years look like. But the second thing is I could see that the buyer and seller relationships in all the markets out there were starting to change radically, and that the buyer was moving to buyer-centric, whether you were talking about, basic goods or basic goods and services, and just thinking about what does it look like for law and other professional services in 10, 20, 30 years down the track. I was convinced it was going to move from a relationship-driven approach to a relationship and a data-driven one. And at that point, and having suffered some of the pain of receiving and responding to RFPs, I had a bit of a vision of what I thought it was going to look like in the future. And I decided, Chris, I didn't want to die wondering about it, and I was going to try and help shape that future. That's it in a nutshell.
Did you feel it to be a true natural shift from being a litigator, a law partner, a leader within large firms to move into a startup CEO role?
Completely unnatural.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was nothing natural about it at all, I have to say, and it's funny, and I'm glad too that I didn't realise, because it's hard work. Any kind of startup business is hard work. Legal tech is particularly hard. I often joke to myself thinking, when I speak to others, thinking, I tell you what I'm going to do. I've got an idea for an easy next 5 or 10 years. I'm going to sell legal tech to lawyers. How hard can that be? and I'm glad I was naive at that point, because if you really know how hard it is, you might think twice.
Right.
But having said that, so it's not actually natural. You have to learn a complete different set of skills, if you like. I've gone from being a partner at a law firm where, what you say essentially goes, and every type, all the type A personalities that work for you, walk over hot coals, because they all kind of want to be, in the end of the day, something like, not necessarily like you, but a partner.
Right.
Okay. So you've got these really talented lawyers working really hard because they aspire, not all of them, but they kind of aspire to partnership. When you start a legal tech company, it's a very different dynamic. You don't have lawyers aspiring to be you, and you've got to develop different skills to basically bring others with very different skill sets on the journey, buy into the vision and start creating a team. So a very different journey, but one that I've so far learned the truckload on, and am continuing to learn every day. And at the end of every week, I astound myself as to not what I've learned, but how much I still don't know. But that's part of the fun of it.
It is the fun of it. Now, do you miss practicing law?
To be honest, no. I think I had a fantastic time practicing law. But I think I'd got to the point where I'd learnt as much, I'm not saying as much as I could have learnt, but as much as I was excited to learn. And I got to a point where essentially we all get to a point where we know we need to move on and start learning new skills and setting new challenges for ourselves. And that's the point I got to. So certainly no looking back and certainly no regrets.
So, Jim, where do you see the legal industry headed? I mean, there's some real tectonic plates shifting and moving right now. Take us up 50,000 feet. I mean, you're on a global level, being that you're Australian, you've worked for one of the largest global law firms in the world, two of them, I mean, frankly, and give us your perspective on where this is all going 5, 10, maybe 20, 30 years out the road.
I think there are significant changes happening across all sorts of parts of whether it's legal practice, the automation of what was otherwise and what has been for years manual process. I think anything that you've seen which is manual within a law firm is at risk. Okay, there are some fantastic automation tools out there, from contract drafting to contract analysis. So I think everything that is manual is under siege, if you like, over the course of the next 5 or 10 years. Certainly from the kind of problem that we're looking to solve, if I look out 5, 10 years down the track, what I see is a transparent, competitive marketplace where basically the in-house teams can know at any point in time what a particular kind of service costs in a particular jurisdiction at a particular level of complexity. And that marketplace actually opening up not only to if you like, a buyer marketplace, but also one where the law firms of the world will be able to proactively offload their capacity. In other words, right now what we see is when a client has a requirement, it goes out and asks its panel firms. What we aren't seeing yet, what I certainly see in the future, is law firms being able to actually bundle up their expertise and offer it out to a marketplace of sorts, whether it's the marketplace of their existing clients or a broader marketplace. So that's what I see. So basically a really fluid, two-sided marketplace where clients see what can basically post out their requirements, and when law firms can actually also post out what their offerings are. And so that's certainly in my space.
Who else is doing that right now? I mean, what other industries?
Certainly we're seeing it. We aren't seeing it yet at the high-end professional services. Where we see it is basic goods and basic level services. When you want the more automated or more menial tasks done, you can send it out to a marketplace and you get a price. But we haven't yet yet seen it at the high-end professional services, but to my mind, it's just a question of time, and it's just a question of getting, we talk about having all of the players that the Fortune 500 companies that, and Law 200 are on a single platform, basically buying and selling. And ultimately, the kind of data that gets generated from that kind of platform will enable the kind of future that I've talked about.
So you're not talking about just a disruption or a shift in the way services are given or delivered or sold in law, but across anything that's a high-end professional service?
Absolutely. Whether it's management consulting, whether it's accounting services, whatever it might be, the same problem exists today. There's very little transparency, and it's really difficult to have an apples and apples comparison of basically of capability and pricing in a way which drives to a true market price. So, certainly I've started from the profession that, I've been in all my life, but the problem does exist out there across other high-end professional services.
I mean, we're kind of beating around the bush of the big elephant of the room of big accounting firms. I actually want to talk on that for a moment, or I want to come back to that point. But before we do that, I wanted to bring up, so you were an attorney, you were an owner, a partner in large law firms where we have seen the largest growth period of big law that the industry has ever seen. And you are at DLA Piper.
Yep.
And now we see firms, and it's a Swiss variety. You see a firm like Denton's, which is 10,000 plus attorneys. And DLA Piper, I think, is around 4,200 attorneys now. Where do you see the world of large law firm headed? Are we getting to the size, or will we ever get to the size of the big accounting firms?
So that's a really good and a difficult question. Where do I see? Ultimately, it is, of course, client-driven. And law firms respond to certainly what they regard as client requirements and being able to deliver. So do I see law firms continuing to get bigger? Certainly up to a point, but when the value is not being delivered, and I don't know, I have to say, Chris, what that point is, but ultimately, if the growth is not consistent with the kind of value that you're delivering to your key target clients, then another strategy or other strategies other than growth for growth's sake is going to have to take hold.
Let's come back to that subject of the big accounting. So you and I know both that big accounting firms cannot have attorneys working for them who are U.S. licensed attorney practicing U.S. law, but that doesn't mean that they can't have those attorneys and do have thousands, if not more than that, outside the United States. Are they also coming to the table and bidding on RFPs and projects with your clients? Are they some of the legal service providers that are trying to get client work?
Yeah, so the answer is absolutely yes. But because a number of those firms are on existing panels of the major corporates that are using PERSUIT, and not surprisingly, we haven't had a single occasion on whether it's one of the big four or other law firms saying, look, we're not prepared to submit a proposal on PERSUIT's platform. And that's because what we're focusing on, as I mentioned before, is those existing relationships rather than trying to create new ones. So we've certainly seen the big four responding, and again, not surprising because a number of them are part of the panel of the legal service providers.
Who else are you seeing out there of that kind of scale bidding on these RFPs on your platform?
Funnily enough, Chris, we actually see ourselves as category creating. So we don't actually see anyone else out there who are looking to solve just this problem. So there's lots of players in the enterprise legal management space. A lot of the focus, certainly up to date, has been around the e-billing and matter management space. But we actually haven't found anyone who is looking to solve the problem that we're looking to solve, at, if you like, at the buying end of legal services in a way which is not service orientated, but in a way which is kind of scalable as a software as a service offering. And that's certainly been part of our challenge earlier, because when you are category creating, you are educating also a market. So we've been really lucky in landing some early adopter Fortune 100 clients who are helping us and the market generally with that education piece. So right now we do see ourselves out there, as I said, as category creating and leading in the space, which I'm really proud of.
And should be. Jim, here's a question. What questions should large company executives, legal executives in the C-suite be asking after hearing this episode?
Why are we not using PERSUIT?
Yeah.
so let me expand on that. Look, certainly that the traction that we get at the C-suite, particularly at the CFO level, is the focus. Obviously, one important focus is on costs. Can you show me, legal team, that we're actually getting the most competitive pricing out there rather than necessarily just going to our favourites and being charged on an hourly rate? And to date, Chris, it's been really hard for the legal teams to demonstrate that they are actually achieving competitive pricing and it's achieving savings and so forth, because it's been either it's hard to do or it's a manual process and the data isn't getting captured. So certainly at that C-suite level, what's resonating most is there's no doubt savings is resonating most, because on average in the platform our clients are achieving between 20 and 30% reduction in their outside counsel spend just by having an easy and competitive manner in which to achieve pricing. And that speaks volumes at that level. But then in addition to that, the process automation, the data capture, which again in the past has been lost. So thinking about, 2, 5, 10 years down the track, if you've captured all that buying data, you will know down the track what a particular kind of work in a particular jurisdiction at a particular level of complexity should cost you, because you've actually got all of that data. So right now that's been missing, but that's starting to resonate not only, as I say, within the legal team, but also at the C-suite level.
Yeah, it's amazing. 20 to 30%. That's compelling. So Jim, your accent is unmistakable. You have Australian roots, but yet you call your home the Big Apple, as I understand. You're in New York City.
Yeah.
And you have family with you there?
So I have moved to New York in the last year or so, and my wife travels between here and back home in Australia. I've got 3 gorgeous kids between 19 and 24, and they're all back in Australia right now. One's working full-time and the other 2 at university. So I'm spending most of my time here and travelling back for the important occasions like Christmas.
As I understand correctly, you guys just had a significant milestone to celebrate?
We did. My wife and I just celebrated 25 blissful years of marriage.
That's awesome.
And we did something that I've been dreaming about, taking a villa on the Isle of Crete, actually, for a few weeks. We just had that in July, so we had a marvellous time, kids over. So, we've got to celebrate these milestones, as you know, Chris, because life's too short.
Yes, this is correct. And what do you think of New York? I mean, there's always the difference of Australians versus the US.
Yep.
I'd love to hear your perspective.
It's funny. So in Australia, I have to say that we struggled early on. I talk in my journey, I talk about crickets in the first year or so, trying to get customers. So basically moving to New York, and the first time I came here a couple of years ago, it was a little bit do or die. Either we were going to land some customers here or we were going to shut up shop.
Okay.
And that was a couple of years ago. And the journey since then, I have to say, has been incredibly exciting. And I certainly attribute moving here to PERSUIT success. Not only just the US generally, but particularly here in New York. The ability to attract talent here, to be close to our customers, to get somewhat of a profile has been instrumental in our early success. And I have to say, when I leave for a time period of more than a few weeks, I start feeling like I lose my mojo a little bit and I need to get back here. So it's a really interesting it's a really interesting effect that the city has on you.
What have you found to be enjoyable for you and your wife in your spare time?
Look, when that spare time comes around, just like, for example, in July for a few weeks, just a reflection and being a little bit grateful. In fact, being a lot grateful. I've been very, very fortunate. Chris, I've had a fantastic career in law. I have a beautiful, healthy family, and I'm doing something completely new, which scares me almost every day, and really enjoying the challenge. So when I put all of that together, I regard myself, and certainly my wife is the same, we regard ourselves as really fortunate in that tiny fraction of the world's population that that can say all those things and that can be truly grateful for how fortunate we have been.
Yeah, it's a gift in and of itself to walk out with gratefulness, regardless of station in life. And so definitely, it's a wonderful gift to share with others. I customarily ask every guest on the show what they're reading, just as a way to recommend sources of content for listeners. What do you have on your bookshelf or on your nightstand, or things you read that you maybe would either suggest or that you're just picking up and enjoying?
The good timing, actually, because I did get a chance over the July break to read a couple of books. So 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, Yuval Noah Harari, an absolute fantastic visionary book. I'd recommend that to anyone. Yuval, of course, was the author of Homo Sapiens and Homo Deus. So I've read the third book and I'm working my way back to books 1 and 2, but that's a fantastic book. And the other book that I've read, which I recommend for everyone, and I wish it was out 20 years ago. It wasn't. I wish I read it then, but it's Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep. So an absolute gem of a book, that one. The importance of basically getting your 8 hours, and that's something which I don't know that I've ever got in the past, but I've really had it. If you read that book and you read all of the studies about the importance of that, it certainly changed my view. And I'm never going to say to my children again, "You can sleep when you're dead." That saying has gone out of my vocabulary.
So interesting.
Yeah.
I feel compelled to read it, and
you have to. Yeah, I absolutely recommend it, Chris. You absolutely have to.
So fascinating. I know that Jeff Bezos of Amazon talks about how he really cherishes and makes sure he always gets his 8 hours. It's fascinating. Jim, last question. What is the kindest thing someone has ever done for you?
Look, I'm not sure I can point to one thing, but certainly if I look at what has influenced me most in my life, it is people who have dedicated their time, whether in a mentoring kind of role or in a personal role, basically dedicating their, what's the most valuable thing, time and learnings. That's what I find that's most valuable to me, and what I find is the hardest thing.
Jim, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for your time on the show today.
Fantastic, Chris. I really enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you, everyone who listened to this episode of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. If you have questions or would like to recommend someone to be on the podcast, please email them to podcast@findthelions.com. If you like this podcast, please leave a review on iTunes. Also, share our podcast via email or social media. To share our podcast, listen to more shows, or to read the transcription of this audio, go to liongroup.recruiting.com/podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. This podcast is for education purposes only. This content cannot be used for commercial use without written permission from the Lion Group. If you like this podcast, leave a review on iTunes.